and I'm just telling you, like, I didn't expect all this protest action to happen so quickly. But anyway, I'm sure we can chat about that. Hey, everyone. We're probably live by now. If we're not, you'll just listen to me rambling halfway through this thing. But welcome back to Live Free and Rant. We want to do both things, Live Free and Rant. And I'm Joel Valenzuela, as you can see under my little nameplate here, in case you're audio only, which happens. And I'm joined by my host, Chris Maidman. How's it going, Chris?
Hey, Joel. You know, can't complain, I guess. How about you?
I mean, you could complain.
I could, but nobody cares. Well, that's kind of the point of the show, isn't it? I guess we're
Yeah,
supposed
you
to
can't.
complain and see how
Yeah,
many people actually
because
care.
you're saying you can't complain, yet your entire reason for being on this thing right here is probably to complain. So
Well, I do like to complain. And anybody that knows me knows that. So I guess we'll just get right into it and start
yeah,
complaining about stuff.
live free and complain. So
Live free and complain. We got to rename the show now.
yeah, but that sounds too beta, I guess. But so what a week it's been. Nothing too crazy out of the ordinary if you think about it, as far as the world's still not chugging along at the same knot pace. And unfortunately, we're still in a militarized police. Oh, whatever. Let's not get too hyperbolic here. We're still in a not quite so free country at the moment.
Yeah, all of our. Well, it's interesting to say that we don't have the rights that we take for granted because, several hundred protesters showed up at the State House Saturday after signing a petition to reopen New Hampshire, and nobody was arrested. So,
Yeah.
while the order is out there saying, you can't do this, they didn't actually punish anybody for doing it. So,
Yeah. So it's still possible to take place, but basically the shutdown has turned out to be pretty. Definitely brought out the worst in government, right? Especially worse than a lot of people. It's brought out the best in some people, but it's brought out the worst that was already there. And this is my prevailing theory about humanity. I think that most of humankind is basically good, like kind of on the soft end of good. Like on a day-to-day basis, they'll go out of their way a little bit to help their fellow person. But as soon as that stuff turns like the wrong way, they just collapse. They turn evil really quick. So like I would say 10% of the population, let's be generous, are great people that they'll be there thick and thin. 20 to 30% are just horrible human beings. But then the rest in the middle, so what are we at, like 40%? So then like 60% are that like basically good, kind of a little bit better than most. Then like, they're nice, they'll go out of their way, but then they can turn, those 60% can quickly turn into the 30% in the wrong situations. And we're seeing a lot of that craziness going on. And so unfortunately, a lot of these people, mostly the government, hires from the 30%. Right, from the awful people. Like if you have been known to kick a puppy ever, congratulations, you're hired. You got yourself a job. That's your calling card. You have puppy kicking instead of business cards.
well, I agree. Most people are generally good, but what we've really seen, and we talked about this last week, is the rise of the quote unquote Karens. Which, by the way, it is no longer PC to call somebody Karen, because apparently it's the equivalent of the N-word for middle-aged white women, and it tells them that they can't stand up for themselves. So we trashed Karens last week. I'm going to trash Karens again because it's such a Karen thing to say that.
Yes, it's it is the equivalent of the N-word. N is in nosy, is in just butt out. So basically, the phenomenon of the Karen is, and I feel really sorry for nice ladies named Karen. In fact, I know one who works in blockchain who's a friend of mine, and she does a fantastic job. She's great. Her name is Karen. I'm sorry, Karen, but you picked the wrong name. You didn't pick it actually, but you ended up with the wrong name. For these times, basically, the Karen is the middle-aged white suburban housewife type person who loves to speak to the manager. Let me speak to the manager. Is always complaining, always indignant about stuff.
Well,
And
that's the
yeah.
stereotype, right? That's the stereotype, but it describes more now a personality. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
person that's going to snitch on your neighbors for gathering in a group of, you know, three, or or for playing tennis, or
Yeah.
for skateboarding at the skate park and getting fresh air in the spring, heaven forbid. Um, but yeah, the stereotype was started by like you said, the middle-aged white suburban mom with the bob haircut who wants to speak to the manager at every retail and restaurant establishment.
Yeah.
But it's no way equivalent to the N-word.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
describing your personality. You control your own personality. If you don't want to be called a Karen, then stop snitching on everybody.
Well, and it's also like I kind of find it equivalent, although less powerful even, to the term boomer. So my parents are baby boomers, is in the generation. I know a lot of really cool people. I mean, I just tend to know strange people, so I know a lot of like really cool people from the boomer generation. But to be a boomer, like there's a certain attitude. I called you a boomer the other day, remember? I called like way younger people boomers for being a boomer. It has nothing to do
Yeah.
nothing to do with how old you are, just how you act. Like people say like, "Oh, well, gold and silver is the only thing that blah blah blah." It's like, okay, boomer, like whatever. Or like, "Oh, well, you need to listen to government and stand behind like all the first responder stuff," which it kind of goes to without saying that like essential worker, whatever, like healthcare workers and people like that are already doing a crazy job that we all rely very much on. You don't need to emphasize that. But like the fact of like, if you say anything against, if you think that your job is as important as the job of a nurse, you're a terrorist or whatever. It's like that is kind of a boomer ideology that everyone needs to be able to feed their family, right? And the free market decides that, and that's how you get paid, is because everyone is essential. Everyone's equally essential, pretty much. So, anyway, the Karen ideology, you can, like, if you're named Karen, I guess it does kind of suck for you. Say that. But for everyone else, if you're a suburban, white, middle-aged housewife with a little bit of a with that bob haircut, you can still not be a Karen. Like you not
100%
you're
correct.
not
Yes.
lumped into that. Like, and if you're born in the baby boom generation, you cannot embody the spirit of a boomer, but you're still kind of a boomer at the same time. It is a little bit more like you're stuck with that label, even if you don't deserve it. But with the Karen, yeah, it's entirely the label. And of course, the part of what makes a Karen, it's not just reporting people and that kind of stuff. It's not just complaining to some kind of an authority, being a busybody and getting people in trouble for that. It's to do so out of a sense of entitlement, some kind of a sense of let me try to like phrase it the perfect way. It's a way of, it's a feeling of being wronged that is the most inversely proportional to the actual amount you're being wronged.
Yes, and specifically in in the age of the the COVID crisis, it's that feeling that anybody that's going about their business as normal, maybe they're not wearing masks, maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
not wearing gloves, maybe they're playing tennis at the tennis court. It's the feeling that those people are somehow putting your life in danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the feeling that their world is at risk because of your otherwise peaceful actions. And sometimes, let's be honest, peaceful. Like, for example, if you are playing basketball with your daughter, you're throwing a ball, whatever, you're in the park, just the two of you, or maybe if you have another kid with you, three of you, you live together. Let's be honest, you live together. If you got COVID, you all got it. If none of you have it, none of you have it, and no one's in danger. But if you send the cops to go up, with the cop might have COVID, to grab you, handcuff you, smash you on the floor in front of the daughter who just is bawling her eyes out, learning for the first time in her life, a little too early maybe, that the police aren't her friends. Like, that's not good. Like, and honestly, there's a lot of discretion that a law enforcement officer can do when they're doing that. But at the same time, they wouldn't be there to begin with if it wasn't for, probably, again, depends on the situation. If it wasn't for some Karen calling him there, someone ratting out Anne Frank in her basement, you know? Like, that's what I'm saying. Nazi Germany was built on Karens. There we go. What is it, that internet law, Godwin's law or whatever, that says you lose
Yes,
the argument?
you just lost the argument because
Yes,
you
I jumped the
implemented
shark.
Godwin's law. Yeah,
I don't care. I jumped the
but
shark.
that's all right.
Yeah, so
That I'm tired of Karens anyways. I'm tired of talking about Karens. Just mind your own business, people. The only person responsible for your safety is you, okay?
yeah,
If you are afraid of getting COVID, stay in your house. Have somebody deliver your groceries, sanitize everything, isolate yourself. But it is not my responsibility to keep you safe. It's my responsibility to keep me and my family safe. And I take precautions to do that. My family takes precautions to do that. And, it's not, so it's like, it's not anybody else's job to keep me and my family safe. And that kind of mindset is what landed us in the boat that we're in right now, with the government dictating all the shutdowns and all the business closures and stuff like that. It completely takes away all of the personal responsibility arguments that, people like myself
yeah.
argue for. And for conservative governance policies, you have the responsibility to take care of yourself and your life, and it's not the government's job to protect you from, it's the government's job is to protect you from other people, like prosecute murder and respond to assaults and robberies and stuff like that in action, crimes that have victims. So unless I'm going out with a diagnosis of coronavirus and I'm coughing on people or commonly touched surfaces, I'm not infringing on anybody else's rights, right?
Yep, absolutely. That's the thing is, people forget that freedom implies and necessitates responsibility. And let me be perfectly honest, a lot of freedom advocates forget that. They forget that they have to be responsible because they have the freedom to do what they want. Now it's on you. It's not like you just get to do whatever you want as long as you don't break the law, and then whatever consequences are someone else's fault. It's like, no, you have freedom to do stuff that other people would deem illegal, would want to deem illegal. You have the freedom, and if you ruin someone's life because of this, it's on you. And as far as like the freedom attitude, the people that hate freedom are people who are in the slavery business. And this is a great segue to Harvard law professor calls for a ban on homeschooling, says it's dangerous to leave children with their parents 24/7.
Yeah, so, I mean, this was in Harvard Magazine of all places. On an unrelated note, they just got a $9 million stimulus from the federal government for some reason, because the $40 billion endowment isn't enough. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but like they needed more money when they don't have any actual students at the time. But this piece, it was written by looks like Erin O'Donnell in Harvard Magazine. And she asserts that homeschooling isolates children. It's dangerous because teachers in schools are mandated reporters. Let's see. What else has she said? I'm going to... and then she goes on to say, this is the real... the whole point of the thing is, she says, children should grow up exposed to democratic values, ideas about non-discrimination, and tolerance of other people's viewpoints. And the assertion behind that is that they can only learn that in a public school setting for some reason. That doesn't make any sense to me, but that's...
Let me start out with, this is like a 95-5 thing. 95% I hate, 5% I kind of see where she's coming from. Let me start with the good part. Let's start with the nice part for a change. So the 5% good part is, first off, I do think it is good for kids to get out of the house. And I've known plenty of, so I was homeschooled, starting in the very beginning of the 90s, like back when no one was doing it. And the only other people who were doing it were a lot of what I would call religious nut jobs. Not saying religious people are nut jobs. Those definitely were, and it would want to basically, the impetus wasn't a failing education system, government indoctrination. It wasn't necessarily all that. There was a lot of that was just like, I want my kid to only know my narrow religious views, and if they get exposed to anything different, like then they're out of the cult, like cult kind of thinking. There's a lot of that stuff, so I get where that's coming from. That I do think that you know, kids should be socialized. They should see other people. They should like run around and have activities like that. And the other bit of agreement is like, I mean, it basically just goes to that. It's just that you do want someone to grow up in an environment where they get exposed to all different kinds of viewpoints, where they get to hang out with other people, where it just their parents might be miserable and yelling at each other all the time, and they just think that that's how people talk to each other. Then they go to some other kid's house, and then they're like, they see that it's nice. They see that they're nice to each other, and then now they're like, that's what life can be like. I'm going to choose not to just be like what I grew up with. I have an alternative. Like, you do need some of that. Okay, that's the 5%. Let me say, this is not like a 30-60. This is a 5%. The rest, first off, who thinks that government, which is like the one institution that can force people to comply with, threat of violence more than a parent, by the way, because if you escape, if you run out of home, and your parents don't have the resources to chase you down and put you back in whatever hell you escaped from, like, you're free. You just can do what you want. You kind of figure out. The government will track you down to the end of days. Like, even in the most abusive situation, government's always stronger. So I don't think anyone with that kind of a monopoly, especially that didn't create the kid, doesn't care about that kid, cares about, I don't think it cares at all, let's be honest, but it cares about, is in charge of all the millions, hundreds of millions of kids. Like, that is the worst place to try to get anything fair and balanced and healthy.
Yeah, I mean, my stepmother homeschooled my two younger brothers, and when she started it, I was like, oh, that was just kind of weird, because I grew up in a public school, and I wasn't really sure what homeschooling was all about, but they went somewhere almost every day.
Yeah.
And it was to places where they, excuse me, interacted with other adults. They interacted with other children. They went to museums, and they did sports, and they went to the coffee shop, and they went to the grocery store, and they went to the mechanic, and they went to all of these places. And in every single one of those places, they learned something, because learning happens everywhere. And we've talked about this at length. So, to insist that a proper education, quote unquote, proper education, can only be performed in a public school classroom is just an absurdity beyond belief. And the closing line of this article from Harvard Magazine is, I think an overwhelming majority of legislators and American people, if they looked at the situation, would conclude that something ought to be done. Because, heaven forbid, parents take responsibility for educating their own children, outside of the government control, and take that into their own hands. And, it ignores a lot of, statistics and facts about homeschooling. Typically, on average, they score 15 to 30 percentile points above public school students on standardized academic achievement tests. They typically score above average on SAT and ACT tests. They usually go on and succeed at college at an equal or higher rate than the general population.
Let's just give a data point to that. I finished college at 19 with a 3.88 GPA. So, and I was a distracted bad student. Just saying. Like, and I know people graduate like at 16, and I'm sure they don't have the emotional maturity that a lot of 22-year-olds might have in a lot of ways, but in some ways, definitely yes. And I think people have this idea that homeschooling is you're just like trapped on the farm, I think a lot of people think that being homeschooled, it just means that you're just stuck at home all the time. You're just like your parents teach you, and it's not that it's a freedom-based thing. And a lot of people, when people think freedom, they think nothing. Where I think that freedom is anything. Like, you are free to do what you want. That some people is like, oh no, I got fired. I got like released from a relationship. Like, I get dumped. I got whatever it is. They just think negative. Like, now I have nothing. I'm single. I'm unemployed. I am uneducated. I'm whatever thing. But really, when you're free, Now it just means you can insert the thing of your dream into that void. That's kind of like what being free is. And I'm sure like everyone's had a situation where they had like a job they hated and they're finally like, oh, yes, I'm done with that. Or just any situation that they got free from, you know? Or it's like, you know, you're wearing a suit all day and then you get free from the suit and get into your jams and get a beer in front of the TV. I mean, that's freedom. You by the way, you can wear the suit. You can be in the whole, you can be like John Wick watching the game or whatever. Like you don't need, but you wear what you want. You don't have to, you're not just confined to this one thing. And that's
yeah.
what
Well, I mean,
freedom.
To compound on that though, I think people are going to get a lot of people might get the wrong impression from the current learning environment that public school children and private school children have been thrust into, because you know they are actually quarantined and isolated in their homes now, right? Mm-hmm. So it kind of what is that confirmation bias? So if you thought that that's what homeschooling was like, and now you're thrust into that situation where you're just stuck at home educating your own children, but using the public school model at your own house, and you can't take them out and do all of these, you know, co-curricular or extracurricular activities that you would be able to do under a normal setting. This is not homeschooling.
Yeah,
and
not
you know,
typically.
It was kind of a joke at the first. It was like, oh, all of a sudden 55 million children are homeschooled in America. But no. You're still using the public school curriculum and model and teachers and infrastructure.
Yeah.
You're just doing it at your house, and you're actually not allowed to even leave your house in a lot of cases.
It's the worst of both worlds. It's what people would falsely assume is isolation that happens in actual homeschooling. And while you're stuck with the actual curriculum, but yet still, I think the kids are probably going to be doing better. I think they're going to get used to that little bit of freedom that they got just by being at home rather than in school. I mean, basically, it's like going to prison, you know?
Well, I mean, we did a few education events last week, and we had, you know, parents, teachers, we had the commissioner of education, we had board of education chairman, and you know what's stuck with me, and I've seen a lot of comments and discussion on Facebook since then, is that self-directed children are thriving, right? Because now they have the freedom to learn at their own pace in their houses, whereas those that aren't as self-directed are not performing as well as they might be if somebody was kind of forcing them along in a school room or a classroom. And, you know, the teachers said, like, you know, they get a lot of, being in the classroom and seeing your students face to face, you get to read their nonverbal cues, you know, their body language and stuff like that. And kind of, you can read them and assist them in that way. So there are children that are doing exceptionally well, you know, with remote learning, and there are a lot of struggles out there. So not to diminish those, but
of course,
you know, I don't know if it's a majority one way or the other. I would assume that a majority are doing at least okay. You know, they're getting through. And of course, a lot of this, and I've said this for a long time, if you want your children to succeed in education, a lot of it is going to come down to the parents in most cases, right?
Yeah, of course.
You know, if you have a student with severe learning disabilities, then it's not just good parenting that's going to solve that. But most of the students that perform well in public schools or private schools or home schools have interested and active, engaged parents that are invested in their children's education, right?
Of course.
Now, if you're a little bit more disconnected from that, you could still have children that succeed. You know, my parents weren't very invested in my education going through high school, and I still graduated in the top 10 percentile, or whatever, that, you know, like 23 out of 240, whatever.
Something good.
Some good. And they weren't very, so I mean, there's all kinds of variables in what's going to help a child or a student succeed in their education. You know, a self-directed learner is going to learn no matter where you put them or no matter what situation they're in, right? You know, you could be a homeless student or a homeless child, and if you're a self-directed learner, you're still going to go learn stuff somehow. You know, like the movie Good Will Hunting, he was a poor construction worker who was a janitor at night and was one of the brilliant mathematician. That's the whole point of the movie, right? He had a very self-directed learning style. He could learn, like he said, for 50 cents at the public library. So
it's a lot of money.
Of course, there are pros and cons to any education system, but like the number one thing I would say is, self-directed children, but you can't control that. They either are or they're not.
Yeah.
But active, engaged parents on top of that, and most people are going to succeed. Now, obviously, these children and students with learning disabilities of any variety are going to need some extra to learn and thrive, and that's what they're not getting right now.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are having to deal with, second rate everything just because the situation, including, of course, haircuts. So I see you have shorter hair than you did before. I assume that was a self-inflicted wound.
Yes. Yes. It kind of proves why it should be a crime, but
yeah. Well,
at least the Attorney General has said that you probably, that's the key word in there, probably won't get arrested for the home haircut, even though the text of the law, which is RSA 313-A, prohibits barbering or the practice of barbering, which includes the cutting of hair. And there's no exemption in there for home haircuts at all. So
how barbarous of that. And it's funny because it's one of those things that at the same time, it's a perfect example of big government and of New Hampshire at the same time. Because, home haircuts probably won't get you arrested. So first off, that's pretty funny because it just shows to a certain extent, the chill atmosphere. It's like you don't have a very hardline authoritarian vein in this whole state to begin with. And so they basically just say, probably, yeah, come on, you're probably not going to get arrested, which around here sounds better. I mean, it sounds like, yeah, okay, good to know. But everywhere else, it's more of a, what do you mean probably won't get, like, that's almost like a mocking kind of thing. Like, it's terrible. But that's because, can you imagine having that? You probably won't get arrested for cutting hair in your own home, but you could.
Right, like
that's not good. It's
not good. The way they wrote the way the Attorney General's office responded to the question too. I mean, I guess it comes down to, the local, like you said earlier, law enforcement officers get a lot of discretion in their line of duty, and a lot of them could use it a little bit more, I think. There's an op-ed in the Union Leader today about that article by Drew Klein, cut your own hair and go to jail up to a year. So Lindsay Courtney is the interim executive director of the state's Office of Professional Licensure and Certification. Say that 5 times fast. Said the law is intended, of course, the law of good intentions, right, to prohibit unlicensed individuals from engaging in barbering as an occupation. So
we could just say engaging in barbering. We just shorten it to
barbering.
Engaging.
Yes.
From engaging. Stop
so
engaging.
Her quote is, I guess somebody broadly construing that could interpret it to be lawful to cut hair under any circumstances. And blah, 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 blah. She said, it's highly unlikely that any law enforcement officer would ever enforce such a law when it comes to cutting a family member's hair. That would seem like a very unreasonable approach, she said. So again, it's like that probably thing. Like, okay, well, probably, but I mean, shouldn't it be pretty crystal clear that nobody's going to come to your house and arrest you for cutting your own hair?
Yeah, that you probably won't get arrested is like, that's not a good way of living life. It's like, can you imagine what happens if you like start dating some girl and then you're like, don't worry, I probably won't cheat on you. It's like, oh yeah, that was great. It sounds great. I feel so relieved. It just, it doesn't work. But it's another one of those things, those planks that lets government essentially get to where they're going to use an immense amount of force and resources to ruin everyone's fun and possibly a lot more. And of course, now we get to, this is from the People's Republic of California, which shouldn't surprise anyone. So public things are shut down in California. Everything's shut down, right? Now in California, in order to shut down a skate park because people were just skating anyway, the tractors come and just fill it with dirt. Like they're just ruining a skate park, well, and like spending a lot of money and doing a lot of stuff when they should be doing crisis stuff, maybe, or saving money or whatever. It's an essential, like they're the essential workers. We're driving those bulldozers. Thank you to all our essential workers for filling in the skate park. Like, and of course now people are starting to rise up. People are starting to rise up, and Defiant residents grab shovels, dirt bikes, and basically they're now turning the newly sanded skate park into a dirt biking spot because, we do what we want. And I think people are finally starting to push back against the hashtag Karen boom.
Well, I mean, this just shows you, this is the American model, right? If you don't like something, if life gives you lemons, we're just going to turn that into lemonade and keep going on. So, I mean, like you said, the waste of taxpayer money and time that they used to go dump sand into a skate park because heaven forbid people get fresh air, and this goes back to whose responsibility is it for you to be safe? I haven't skateboarded for a long time, but I don't think I was ever within 6 feet of somebody while I was skateboarding, mostly because I was terrible at skateboarding and I would be afraid that they were going to crash into me or I was going to crash into them and we were all going to die. But I still don't skateboard. I can't go sideways, apparently. But
we need to get a hat made that says "Make sick nose grinds great again."
This isn't even like the worst of it. They were going around to basketball courts in some states across the country and bolting 2x6 boards to the top and bottom of the hoop so that people can't play basketball. And either that or they were taking the backboard and the hoop completely off entirely. So you can't even go to the park and play basketball by yourself, never mind with other people. It's I'm so over all of it. Like there's common sense measures, and then there's just crazy tyranny, and dumping sand into the skate park and removing basketball hoops is on the crazy tyranny end of that spectrum.
Yeah, and I personally think it's a lot deeper than just what it seems. If you notice, government's good at two things: hurting people and breaking things. Like and every good that they accomplish is through that. And the generous things that might be done go through hurting people and breaking things and giving to a cartel or a prescribed group or whatever. Now, if we see, it's a very perfectly natural move to do these kinds of things because you create your laws, your number one priority is to enforce them. It doesn't matter the outcome. You're not at all incentivized to do a good job of it. You just gotta enforce the law. And notice they're deploying all their resources to doubling down on that power. The concern isn't where people are sick, they need help. The concern is people are doing stuff I said not to, so I'm going to do everything I can to just smack them around until that stops and my power remains absolute. Unlimited power. Yeah.
So now we have states that are starting to unwind some of these restrictions. Anyways, one of the big headlines over the weekend, I think it was that Vermont is starting to open up the state. And people, especially here in New Hampshire, were like, Vermont can open. Why can't we? And,
which is great.
It sounds great. You read the headline, you're like, Vermont's doing this. Come on, let's do it. Let's catch up. Well, Vermont was opening stuff that shouldn't have been closed in the first place, like the vegetable seed section of Walmart. So they're opening stuff that we never even closed. So they're catching up to us still.
Yeah.
Even though the headline reads, Vermont is starting to reopen their economy. Well, not really. They shouldn't have stopped selling fishing rods to begin with.
Which is just absolutely crazy. And it goes to show you that if there's something magical, for lack of a better term, about failure. It's just like there's nothing that, like, you know how stubborn people are. Oh yeah, I'm right. I'm right. If everyone's stubborn, okay, that's just what we do. We cling on to our ideas. We don't listen to reason. Every one of us does that to a certain extent. There's nothing like falling on your face to change your mind. That's the only thing that changes your mind. You can have a terrible idea, like, oh, I think this is work. I think I look good in bell bottoms, or whatever stupid idea you might have, and then you fail, like you strike out trying to date, or you literally trip and fall on your face. Or, you have an idea. I'm gonna ban tipping at my establishment, and I'm gonna like have everyone share the profits equally, and I'm going to let the workers band together and decide my hours that I'm going to be open at my crazy communist cafe. And then guess what? Like, it's great that you have those ideas. I mean, but then boom, you fall. You're done. It doesn't work. Oh, and now you have to change your ideas, or you're going to keep falling. And there's just something about being able to just come up with an idea, and then you just run with it, and you never get called on it. Or people try, but you get to still do it. Like, for example, oh, let's just make sure that, like, we should all be locked down. Then everyone's showing up at the grocery store, and everyone's showing up at Walmart. You can't tell them not to. You can't just say die, because that's like a bridge too far. You can't just say you're going to die alone in your home right now. Sorry, because that's literally the opposite of what the whole pandemic measure is supposed to counteract. But then you start saying, well, what if we just say these are essential items? You can obviously shop for those, but we don't want people shopping for the other stuff because that's a risky activity. So then you just start banning everything. Oh, ban sale seeds, ban fishing rods, ban everything. And then it just sounds good on paper. I thought it was a good idea. And then it just fails miserably, but you don't get to feel the failure because you're government. You don't feel failure. You just get to continue with your completely moronic idea forever. But guess what? Even government isn't immune to failure, because sometimes the people rise up. Now, what is this? What is this I'm looking at here?
Let's see. You got that must be the protest from Saturday out in front of the State House.
In Concord.
I mean, it looks like a good group of people, right? I mean,
people said it's up to like 400 people, right?
I wasn't there.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
Because, we go back to personal responsibility and making your own risk assessment. I am at risk if I catch the virus for having serious complications from that. So I am being responsible on my own without daddy government telling me how to be responsible. So I was curious. I did want to drive up and kind of check it out, but I didn't end up doing that. It looks like they have a good crowd, several hundred people, some estimates up to 400, like you said. And you'll notice that they're on the sidewalk close to the street. I don't know if you've ever been to the State House, but behind, if the camera panned right, there's a large lawn in front of the State House there that, usually people gather on to do protests like this. But there was a big sign at all the entrances that said, gatherings over 10 are banned. So everybody gathered on the front sidewalk, it looks like. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was, doing anything super crazy, I guess. A lot of people, I heard, were wearing masks. In the picture you've got, I see a few, but it looks like many are not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people have the responsibility to keep themselves safe. I hope none of those people have any serious consequences from the virus should they catch it, heaven forbid.
That would suck.
But if they do, it will be their own fault. I mean, to be blunt about it, I just because I don't necessarily agree with what they did, not that I disagree with what they did, but I think they could have done it. It looks like they could have done it in a lot safer of a manner by, wearing masks and being 6 feet apart, but that's up to them. So now if they get it, it's going to be on them.
Yeah. And honestly, if you look at this whole situation, like, I didn't go either because I'm not sick, but I also didn't want to get sick and didn't want to, whatever. But I think that there's a colder calculus than we might anticipate going on here. It's not necessarily, oh, I'm being irresponsible. And there's a certain thing of like, well, look, by coming here in a big group, there's increased risks of getting actually sick and getting other people sick and doing more damage to people. That's, you can't avoid that there is, at least behaving in this way. There were some pictures from Israel where some people, like thousands of people gathered. I don't know if it's thousands. Don't fact check me, but a whole bunch of people gathered with masks on 6 feet apart and just like completely covered the area, but in like perfect little 6 feet, a more responsible way maybe. I don't know if we could fit that many people here, but you're weighing the risk of not only injury, like sickness to yourself, but sickness to others and the damage that causes. And I think people actually are weighing this. Maybe I'm giving them more credit than they deserve, but
I think they deserve that credit. I know a lot of people that went, and they, they're not stupid people that were like, oh, we're just going to go protest the government. They were, they weighed out the risks and the benefits, and I know those conversations took place because I saw them take place among some of the attendees at this protest. So
yeah,
you're not giving them too much credit, but continue.
Well, that's what I'm saying is they're weighing the possible risks and damage versus the possible risks and damage of letting tyranny go on unchecked. And it's unfortunately turned into like, this is how you know it's something good and dangerous, is when you start having, and whenever you have a big messy thing like this, it becomes messy and people do stupid things on both sides. And a bunch of people are like, you liberals suck and the virus is a hoax, and like a bunch of dumb stuff that comes out of it too. But, it's just what happens when you get the ball moving like that. But there's a lot of people that are just extremely angry and callous against us, wanting all these protester people to die, essentially. And then they're trying to frame it as like, you hate nurses or something, which is, I think is kind of hilarious. But one of the most iconic pictures for the wrong reasons is they have like some nurse supposedly standing in front of a car trying to prevent a protester car from driving by. And it looks like, yeah, healthcare workers standing up to these dumb morons. And the flip side of it is, first off, you don't know if that's even a healthcare. It could be Antifa wearing a mask, but which they do anyway. They've been very good at that. But the person from the car is screaming like, "Why are you here? You have a job. I don't have one." Like the healthcare worker's like, "Oh wait, let me stop caring for these people." Like honestly, like all respect to be able to take care of people that really need it, but let me stop doing that for a second and jump out in the street and basically yell at some lady who doesn't have a job when I do. It's like, and that's the brutal fact that we don't like to encourage, is the essential workers are privileged. And I hate to say it like that, but it's true. If you are an essential worker and you have a job, like you have a let's be honest, probably a shit job, at least right now. It probably sucks. You probably have a lot more work, more dangerous conditions other than other people. You can't take away from that, but you have a job. You're lucky that you do not, like, so many people have their livelihoods ruined and their whole families and everyone who depends on them. All of a sudden you just can't make bills. And then like what, your electricity gets shut off, your water gets shut off, you can't feed, you can't pay your, like all of a sudden everything starts to crumble around you. And then you could become a homeless person or worse, dead. Like this is where you're at. And that's why people are rising up, is because they are starting to get desperate quick. And the stimulus check, oh, what a joke. Like, that doesn't do anything. Let's just be honest. Like at my brokest, it would pay for like a couple months of rent in some crappy little room. But that was like, what about people that have dependents? What about people that have absolutely no income? Like, it's pretty shameful to see that it's come to this, where people are desperate enough. They're not stupid. They're not going out because they're stupid. I mean, some are. Let's be honest. Some are. But most people.
Some will go to protest the government at any time there is a protest against the government.
Or not even against the government, just protest the air. They'll just protest. But
yeah,
there's a lot
some
of
people will protest
here.
just for the sake of protesting. But there's a lot of anxiety. So when this started, 5 weeks ago, I guess, there was a lot of anxiety around the virus. And at first everybody was like, okay, we'll, kind of lay low and see how this plays out, and we'll see where it's going. And then, after 5 weeks of being unemployed or having your business shut down, you kind of get anxiety going back the other direction, because that's a long time, missing 5, 6, 4 paychecks. A good chunk of the country doesn't have enough money to
Uh-huh.
survive a $400 emergency, never mind 4 weeks of unemployment. So there's a lot of anxiety. Now the anxiety pendulum is swinging back the other direction. And these people, I don't want to say these people. I hate when I say these people. A lot of people, like, are getting anxious the other direction, saying, okay, well, can we go back to our lives now? Because we're looking at the numbers and we're looking at, New York is now all of a sudden they weren't 40,000 ventilators short like they said they were. New Hampshire is laying off healthcare workers. The
Yeah.
cases they're not at the level that you said they were going to be at. So can we kind of go back about our business now? Can we kind of go back to life? Can we get back to
Responsibly.
work? Yeah, responsibly. Nobody's saying, well, okay, I shouldn't say
Some
nobody
people.
because some people
Few
are saying
people.
it,
Few people.
but most people are going, all right, well, let's be responsible and let's be smart and let's start getting back to work. And there's a good graph I put up on my Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like Saturday, and it's a three-way Venn diagram that overlaps in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And it
I think
says,
I've seen that
believe it or
one
not,
everywhere.
it's actually okay to be all three.
Mm-hmm.
People taking COVID-19 seriously,
Yeah.
check. People very concerned about impending economic devastation, check. And people worried about expansion of authoritarian government policies, check. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm all three. The virus, I take it seriously enough that I take extra precautions, like not going to that protest on Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
even though I think we need to start moving the New Hampshire economy back in the right direction.
Yeah.
Because I take the virus seriously. There's enough evidence to show that it's worse than the flu, especially in such a short and condensed period of time, and that it's highly infectious,
Mm-hmm.
and that it actually causes people to die. We
Yeah.
know that,
But
and we
guess
know that
what?
the economy is in the dumpster. Go ahead.
Yeah, but guess what? You did go to the protests. You're here right now, aren't you? You're living free and ranting on the air right now. You're still doing something about it just because you don't want to do it in physical person where you could risk your health or other people's health.
Right, right. So there's ways to do things like there's a safe way to do just about everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And today's 420. Is there a rally at the State House again today? There's always like a 420 smoke out there.
There's probably got like
That
four
just struck
people.
my mind.
Probably like four people out there.
Well, that's a normal number for that rally, isn't it?
Yeah, so then 2.5. I don't
Two
know.
and a half.
Hey, there's a Lieutenant Dan in there with no legs, but that's exactly the thing is people are starting to get desperate. And here's the thing: when you see giant rallies of people, and I don't know if 400 really is giant, but for New Hampshire, in the middle of
It's good for New Hampshire.
for New Hampshire, and in the middle of all things considered, the circumstances, and in a state where the governor himself has been pretty popular. Like, despite all this, people are mostly behind him. A lot of protesters surveyed have a positive view of him, in fact. Yet here they are bitching about the stuff that he's enacted. Like, he's the one that did it. Pretty much no one else did. So,
Yeah, no, everything that happened in New Hampshire, they're all emergency executive orders. So they're all him. But not nobody, because there are a lot of people blaming him and are going to probably take it out on him in November, which is unfortunate because, in Andy Valinsky, we would have been more like California and New York as in terms of the lockdown.
Would have been worse.
So people are like, oh, it's bad, but we really like Governor Sununu because he's just a regular guy. And, he was at Shaw's wearing a bandana and he's doing, so it's like, well, we understand why he had to do it, but we hope he starts turning it around. Is kind of the vibe I got from what they were saying.
Yeah, but the thing remains the same, which is when you see a bunch of people like that protesting who aren't recreational protesters, which there are a bunch of people, like it tends to be on the left more than the right. There are some on the right too, but that just like to organize rallies and protests and just they're always doing that kind of stuff. If you have normal people, like people that don't do that normally, coming out on the streets, something is like wrong. It's not just they got it's a nice day, they might as well go. Someone told them that their rights are at stake, and they're like, all right, might as well. It's like, no, these are people that are scared. They're scared and angry, some combination of all that, and you cannot you cannot discount the power of the angry mob, let's just say. And so that kind of takes
like the vocal minority, right?
Yeah,
So
and also this is not even a vocal minority. This is the tip of the iceberg of like 250 million people, probably like a giant chunk of the country that will wreck shit, for lack of a better term, if things continue.
I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong because they've done polls, and I don't implicitly trust polls, but there's enough of them out there now.
You ain't Hillary Clinton. You don't implicitly trust polls.
I mean, I look at them. They're good guidance. I never believe the numbers, explicitly. I'm never like, oh, well, look at that. But they have done polls, and they say measures taken by your state government to slow spread of virus, and the vast majority of people that they're polling say they're appropriate. So
how's that going to change when next month rolls around? I wonder.
Right. So the longer it goes, the more those numbers will change. But a lot of people even seeing, among New Hampshire, it's in my circle of people that I see all the time.
Crazies. Yeah.
Half and half. There's some crazies and there's some, normies, and then there's whatever. So some people are just completely done and fed up with this, and they want to get back to work. They're over it, right? And then there's some people that were saying that protest Saturday was extremely reckless and dangerous. And then there's some people in the middle, like me, where I'm like, okay, we should start reopening, but let's be smart about it. Just don't, undo everything all at once. And there's several reasons to that. So it has to be a measured, responsible approach to this. I mean, let's face it, right?
Yeah.
The government already did this. We're already in the middle of it. So being like, oh, the government should just stop doing this and open everything back up, that's not a real rational response, right? So if you want to be rational and responsible about this, we can start opening today, probably, but you have to be kind of careful and specific and slowly. You can't just rip the carpet out from under people.
Yeah.
Especially because half the population, at least, is petrified of getting this virus, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the slow the spread, flatten the curve model to begin with, because the whole point was to bring that curve down under the capacity limit for the healthcare services, right? So as soon as there was a limited number of beds, ICU beds, there's a limited number of ventilators. We want to slow the spread and flatten the curve so that we don't run out of beds and we don't run out of ventilators, because we don't want people dying in the street, right? We want the chance to save everybody.
Yeah.
That was kind of the thinking, the rationale. And then they moved the goalposts on us. And now it was like, because we flattened the curve by all appearances, right? Pretty much everywhere in the country. But we're not reopening yet. I mean, so it's
yeah.
The reality is that most people, at least probably 50%, have either gotten this or will get it at some point. There's more and more tests coming out with asymptomatic carriers and stuff like that. But most people in this country are probably going to get it. They keep saying the estimates are, at least 50-60% of the population is supposed to catch this virus at some point. So by keeping these, flattening the curve was just supposed to bring it under the healthcare capacity. But we kind of, and I said this, did I say this on the show? I don't remember or not. Are there enough people getting it fast enough? Right? Because we have in New Hampshire, our curve is
from the curve perspective, then definitely. Yeah, it's crazy.
Right. So we're way under, like we have healthcare services across the state laying off employees. So now we have healthcare workers on the unemployment line, which is kind of like extremely counterintuitive, given that we're in a pandemic.
But so when you think about this whole who's on what side of what fence, the actual numbers of people they aren't all equal. Like not every group is equal. And now we come to the last little picture I got from the protest, which is your friendly neighborhood Boogaloo squad, which is, I'm sure there's like a good little tongue-in-cheek thing here of just hey, it's protest day, might as well all come out and, decked out and stuff. And part of it is just, exercising the right to keep and bear arms in a peaceful manner. And look, they all have like their masks and their gas masks. A little ridiculous looking, but that's fine. They're, dressed to invade Poland or whatever. Now, the basically what people should think of with this is, first off, let's just not get it twisted. These are peaceful people. These are people that are basically, they're big nerds more than anything right here. And they just want to show up to support the reopening of the economy and stuff like that. And at the same time, they like to show off their hardware, and they like to exercise their right to bear it. Now, what this doesn't necessarily directly convey, but there's an implicit thing of, you think that people will be turning up, like, you don't think that these millions of people who are out of work, who are desperate, aren't going to turn up who aren't dressed like this today. They aren't going to turn up dressed like this tomorrow. Like, that's the thing, is there's a difference between, I'm kind of on the fence, and, oh, we absolutely shouldn't. In fact, I'm going to Karen out, and hashtag Karen boom. I'm going to Karen out and go start reporting people who do anything against this because you need to. But then that is nowhere near as powerful as people that are like, I'm about to starve to death in my family, and I'm about to start shooting people. Like, I don't think it's going to turn into that. I really don't. However, there's always that of, if you have nothing left, a caged animal, right? Or cornered animal, nothing left to lose, crazy stuff starts to happen. So, and I would guess that there's definitely millions. There might be 100 million. But there's a lot of people that would become an angry mob and just tear down the governor's mansions all across the state, or just, basically start going back to work. And here's what I would kind of hope, because I don't like to see angry, violent, kind of all that kind of nasty stuff. It's always a symptom that something's wrong. And still wrong things happen, right? Sometimes you just got to let it burn through. But as far as like dissent and protesting, but we get to the point where when people start to get desperate, I would rather not see them go and start like, rioting and tearing down the capital city. I would rather see them reopen their businesses and their friends just kind of stand guard outside the businesses. And if people try to shut them down, basically just block their way and say, you can't shut them down, and do a civil disobedience. It's still a risky maneuver. It's still something that I believe you should only do when you're desperate. But at least it's not ransacking the Capitol and just like, like you just, at some point, you just got to go back to work. And let's be honest, most businesses, if they reopen today, and how many customers would they get? Like, how many people would still go if you ran like a little sit-in cafe or whatever? Even if you just said social distancing, you gotta stay, gotta walk in the certain line, and sit next to there, and then they spray everything down and they wipe. You're still not going to get a lot of people, and especially
because people won't be comfortable going out, right?
Especially
so
if it's
I agree
still,
with you.
especially if it's still being cracked down on. But so what I would say is, if everyone just decides to reopen their businesses now, and then just basically, part of it is like to dare the government to go after them, because they will, especially in some of these worst places like Michigan or New York. You just say, as soon as you start turning around, like we're closed to yes, we're open, you just get like 5 bullets in the head from a cop. Again, dramatization of New York City, but still, I think that it might just be a thing where people have to civilly, again, that's part of civil disobedience, is you're not trying to riot and wreck things. That's a very special time for that. That's not good. Civil disobedience in terms of like, I have the right to make a living. I have the right to live. Life, liberty, property. If I can't have the liberty to exercise and grow my property, I don't have the right to live. At some point, it might turn into that. And I hope stuff happens organically before then, but it might need a little push. It might need a little few people reopening their businesses despite the warnings.
Well, this is what I wrote about this after the protest ended. I said, now what? Now what? You protested, right? But
Yeah.
the governor's not going to rush back into the corner office and start undoing this just because 300 people gathered on the state house lawn. But I concluded with, if you're really that desperate and you want to engage in civil disobedience, open your business, right? If you cut hair, just start cutting hair again. If you have a small cafe, like you said, be smart, right? Space the tables 6, 7, 13, 20 feet apart, whatever you want. Sanitize the table, sanitize the salt and pepper shaker, sanitize all the stuff at the table in between everybody. But, like you said, you're not going to nobody's just going to like rush to come. Well, I mean, people will go, right? People that support civil disobedience and reopening the economy, they will support you. If I already cut my hair, but if a barbershop was, doing black market haircuts, I would have gone. But like you said, it's a risky proposition because on the back end of this, maybe the state doesn't come in and shut you down right away, right? Maybe they're like, nah, waste of resources. Just let them do what they want to do
eventually.
But on the back end of it, just about every business in New Hampshire is like licensed, right? So if you own a restaurant, you have a liquor license, you have a health certificate from your local health department, you have all of these licenses. So if the liquor commission yanks your liquor license,
you're kind of in a bad spot.
Then you're screwed, right? Then your restaurant just goes under. So then what do you do? If you cut hair, you're a licensed barber, you're a licensed cosmetologist, or a licensed
esthetician.
Never mind. I'm not gonna. Yes, thank you.
Close enough.
You're all licensed from the state, and if you go against the governor's orders, they're going to come after your license in 3 weeks. So it's a very risky. You get some short-term gain,
maybe not even
possibly.
Gain, but what you're trying to do is not stand alone. What you're trying to do is start an avalanche of people, everyone defying the orders and reopening the businesses, and especially because, like, how many people will then, where they say they already say you can't open, and then if they say, well, now you can't open because of your liquor license, well, people who are already kind of going against the grain, patronizing said business to begin with, would probably still do it. And at that point, you start calling into question all these nonsense things like a liquor license. Who needs a liquor license? Nobody should. Who needs a license to cut hair? Nobody should. Who needs any of this kind of stuff? Nobody should. So now,
well, right, but I mean, you have
avalanche.
To look at the downstream. Yeah. I mean, it would take. It's not going to happen overnight, first of all, and it's going to take, like you said, an avalanche to make it happen. But nobody's going to deliver alcohol to your establishment without that license, right?
Yeah,
because they need that.
Not.
I mean, there's only 3 major beer distributors in the state, if I have that right, and if you don't have a license, they're not going to deliver to you. There's only 3 of them. So what are you going to do? Drive to Massachusetts in a box truck to pick up kegs and just lie about what they're for?
Or someone else might do it for you? Well, that's the thing is, like, this is where it starts. And I think anyone in positions of power in government, not just the low-level lackeys know nothing, but the people in power know exactly how far, or they have a guess on exactly how far they could push things before that happens. Before, like, for example, if the shutdown was just for another year, I'd say, you know what, let's be safe. Let's do another year. At that point, you will have that avalanche. At that point, you will have people forcibly reopening their stuff. You will have people defying the king's orders, as it were. I hate to use that, nomenclature, but, the keen people ruined it for me.
Well, the Constitution does refer to the governor as the Excellency.
Yeah.
So in this case, Chris Sununu would be His Excellency. So, I mean,
yes.
Terms of nobility, we'll just go with it.
Yeah. So at that point, you start to have like a major distributor starts opening up, and maybe if they're too big, they're too scared. But then you have like a middleman who's just saying, I'll buy all the beer. I'll use a network of friends to just like buy it all and then sell it to you. And then like before you know it, people start. That's the thing is you break one law, you start breaking more. And at some point, and that's the thing that the government is extremely afraid of, because they know there's a lot of laws that don't stand up. And if you just start like thing after thing after thing, it could be complete, now we don't need a government anymore. And then, so usually when you have things like this, like with Gandhi and his civil disobedience in India, eventually they got tired of kicking the shit out of this guy. And they just left the country. Like they didn't they could have gunned them all down and stuff, but at some point they just knew it would be a tide against them, and they're just like, you know what, we give up. We'll let
Yeah,
you.
you know who didn't get that message was the British about
Mm-hmm.
245 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, they thought they'd gun us all down. Then yesterday was the anniversary of the shot heard around the world 245 years ago. So, everything happens in cycles, right? I mean, we've seen governments rise and fall. If you're a student of history, you've seen governments rise and fall over thousands of years. And, our founding fathers put together this system of government in order to kind of try to balance things and avoid exactly what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah.
They were like, all right, well, the government doesn't have these powers. The government exists at the state and federal level to protect individual rights, right? The smallest minority. They protect individual rights, which are basically life, liberty, and property. Nobody has the right to take your life, your liberty, or your property without, due process in a court of your peers and all systems that we set up to protect the rights of the individual. And it seems like that's the biggest thing that's been pointed out by this, pandemic is, does anybody have individual rights anymore?
No.
I mean, sure, nobody got arrested on Saturday, but in Raleigh, North Carolina, they have deemed protesting to be a non-essential activity.
Yeah.
Well, the First Amendment kind of explicitly lays out
That it's very
that
essential.
protesting is always an essential activity, and petitioning the government for redress of grievances is always an essential activity, and religion is always an essential activity, and peaceable assembly is always an essential activity. So at first, when we founded this government 244 years ago, and we signed the Constitution,
didn't, but other people did.
Yeah, the
Yes.
formal we. Those rights were explicitly put in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
They weren't granted to us from the government. Those are, God-given or natural rights. If you don't believe in God, they're natural rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every human is born with those rights. And the government cannot infringe on those rights because they're natural. You're born with them. You're born with the rights to life, the right to liberty, the right to property. Those are natural rights. You're born with them. So the government can't take them away without due process. And over, 245 years, we've grown and grown and grown. And the bigger we grow, the more our individual rights are restricted for the quote unquote common good.
The greater good.
The greater good, the common good, whatever you want to call it. And then, it all culminates with this public health crisis where everybody's individual rights are just suspended on the drop of a dime.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there who'll say, oh, your individual rights weren't suspended. Well, they were, right?
Yeah.
Because it was the protest that happened Saturday was illegal. Just because nobody got arrested doesn't make it any less illegal. The governor's order made it illegal.
Of course.
If they're coming in and telling you that you can't operate your business, well, that is a taking under the Constitution, right? They took your property and stopped you from using it. Yeah. So you lost your right to property and to liberty.
Let's not forget that the public good, the public, is made up of a patchwork of individuals. And if you hurt enough individuals, you hurt the public good anyway. It's self-defeating. So the idea is not... this is a very socially applied kind of situation where we have tons of people, and the idea is for the good of all of us. Like, not just let healthy people work, and if they get sick, they get sick, whatever. And if the healthcare system gets overwhelmed, it's going to be just some of the outliers who die. Like, no, that's not acceptable. And so we're going to help everyone. Everyone's got to be under this. But then now you have this giant pot of people that don't have money anymore, and they're getting desperate. And now the greater public good is sinking by the same measures meant to keep the greater public good afloat. And that is one giant rant we just did. We went over like an hour and 15 minutes or whatever. So we got to wrap this up. What are these buttons for? Go like this right above your head.
Me?
Yeah. Other hand.
Oh, other hand.
Yeah, that's the Patreon. If you want to give,
there we go. Yeah,
and
patreon.com, patreon.com/live free and rant.
yes, if you want to support the good work that we do and want to throw some dirty fiat currency bucks at Chris, that's where it goes. If you want to throw some digital stuff at me, Cointree, cointr.ee/the desert links, and that's all the crypto stuff and also my other links and stuff. But right in the middle right here, oops, wrong way, subscribe. Whatever channel you're watching this on, subscribe and participate in the live chat and all that kind of stuff. Next Monday, there's another one, so don't forget. All right. Any parting shots?
Well, maybe we can do this in person. Sitting next to each other someday. Maybe we'll even sit 6 feet away. 6 feet away, but we'll see.
5.5. In the meantime, like
if a small business near you, just support them to the extent of your abilities. Buy some local beer, buy some whatever. Support your local businesses, support your friends and family. We'll all get through this eventually.
Yes, and don't forget to say no to the Karen boom. Hashtag Karen boom.
No more Karens.
No more Karens. Karen is canceled.
Karen is canceled, and with that, we will end this.